Hi everyone. So as Phil said, I've been trying to get me down a few times, but I've always said I was too busy. So I thought today I'd come down and talk a little bit about what we do at Lloyds. So my name is Robert Eriksson. If you wonder what my funny accent is, I'm from Sweden, but I've been living here for quite some time. I work for a bank. And one thing, if you're ever going to do a presentation, never do it after someone that do UX, because obviously my presentation and slide won't look as fancy as his. But anyway, so I'm going to talk about innovation on legacy systems. I'm certainly old enough to talk about legacy system because I probably built a few that would be classified as legacy system these days. But I will touch a little bit about innovation, nothing specific of what we're doing as such, but really what helps, and also how on earth do you get that to work on the old things that always sits at the bottom. But I thought to start with something a little bit about just general engineering and stuff to see if there's anyone in the room is as old as me, yeah? So a little bit of a query. Anyone knows what this is? One person? Two? All right.
One came off to me.
Way. So basically, it's a game. It came out this is my first computer. I was 9 years old. It's a ZX81. Has 1K memory, and for the ones that don't know, it says 1,000 characters or 150 words you could type into that one until the memory ran out. So if you wanted to play fancy games like this, you actually need an extra 16K memory that went on the back of it, yeah? And it came out on kind of cassette decks like this, and that's kind of where I started my career as an engineer, 9-year-old, really cool, started the program, went through the whole lot, and that's kind of where I got the bug, I guess, of being an engineer. But you start the funny, always those facts, like back then, 1983, mega memory, 1,600 quid, yeah? Now, a lot less. Put that a little bit in context, yeah? If you have a mobile phone, 64 gigabyte one, would that cost you 100 million quid? That shows you some and how quickly, things have moved, yeah? I'm not that old, so it's kind of, in those years, it moved from there. But of course, I started with that one, went on to kind of the ones that understand those type of computer, come on, Commodore 64, Amiga, after that one. That one had the same CPU as the early Macintosh. It's not the same these days. So I actually went on to have a Macintosh, but the old ones before they went on and then actually came back with all the cool things they have today. But I went on from here to go to uni, computer science, of course, because I was a geek. I don't know if it's cool to be a geek these days, but it certainly was not cool back then. But anyway, I thought I was really cool. So this is me, 1993, in my student dorm with my computers, gold chain and all, I was before Backstreet Boys, yeah, so they know who they copied. Anyway, so it's a little bit. So from me, I started out there, early days, computer science. I went from there, I had to drop the cap because I started working for Accenture as a software engineer or a developer, it was called back then, or an analyst, kind of, that's the name they had. Had to take that one off, white shirt, tie and all of that. I guess that was the only way to justify kind of the rate cards that we had back in the day, yeah? Ran out of uni, very, very expensive consultant. We were supposed to know what you were doing, yeah? But anyway, so done a lot of consulting, spent a few years then in the industry, worked for RBS, short stint back into consulting, and since 2 years back, I'm at Lloyds Banking Group. And I'm just going to talk a little bit, going to just show you a little bit of what we do. Not going to sell you what we do as such, but it's quite interesting. It's like serving customer for more than 250 years. Actually, if we look on one of the brands, so Bank of Scotland, 1695, so 300 years old. You see, also where do we have it? Employees, quite a big organization. And of course, innovation, fast moving, at pace, big and old, generally it's not the right thing to be because as you can imagine, lots of different brands, which means lots of integration, bringing things together. Generally, you try and make it work quickly and fast, leaves a lot of, what we would call technical debt behind you from that perspective. But just give you a bit of a flavor, 30 million customers, in perspective, 65 million in the UK, big number. Processing 125 billions every working day. That's a third of all the money that moves through the system. So you can imagine the things that sits behind the system we have. It's obviously very, very important as an infrastructure. So, of course, we need to be mindful when we're moving fast with things. We can't maybe do what some other organizations do as, test and learn. I don't think this kind of group of people would be very happy if you just trialed something and see it worked. If something goes wrong, more than well. TSB were in the press the other week, when things don't go well for big banks, 10 minutes, we're on the first page, and BBC are there and telling us all the banks, they never work very well from that one. And it's the same in terms of mortgages and everything. It's kind of lots of products out there. I just wanted to give you kind of a flavor of it, just the challenge that you face if you're trying then to innovate in an organization like this. So what we did, this started before I joined the organization. I'm just going to tell you, so like most organizations, some years ago, everyone, of course, we need to have digital. Everyone was doing digital. So we created a digital division. So we had the typical business division. So we are a retail bank, commercial bank, and an insurance part as well. And of course, then we created a digital division, which is where in the early days, going back probably 10 years or so now, with the internet banking come along, of course, a little bit later, mobile offering and all of those things. But back in towards the end of 2014, kind of thinking we need to do things differently because it's not good enough just to have that bank. We need to move to a place where we can actually start to innovate and move much faster. And the focus that happened here was what we heard there earlier. It's important to focus on the customers. That's kind of what matters to us. So what we did before my time, as I said, but what we did was creating then what we call customer journeys. So looking on the things the customer do, and basically realigned all the work across those 10 journeys. I mean, this is no secret. I mean, there was a Forrester report that's out and this paper is taken from, so you can search on the internet just for it if you're interested in actually a little bit more detail from it. But it's really then starting to looking on from each of those kind of journeys as such, what is it that we can do differently and better, but very much focused on kind of the digital, the user experience side of things. So if someone looks on this one, I mean, you know, Scrum Master and so on, that's very long cycles. But if you look on a bank and the things what we actually do and the complexity of those things, it requires a bit of time. And if you look on it, it's not that slow if you put it in context. Because think about it here, trying to re-understand, work with your customers. I mean, take mortgages as an example. You need to go out there, you understand the market, what is it that matters, customer segmentation, all of that one. You don't do that in 2 weeks. It takes a little bit of time to understand it. But then the question is then, well, what is our offerings? How do we reposition that? How do we move forward from there? It also takes a bit of time. And then it's all about execution. And this is kind of where all the kind of the doers do, if you want, from that perspective. So what we did in digital back then, it was basically looking on all the other ones out there, agile methods, you know, the Spotifys, everyone like that. So along all of those ones, we created what we call customer labs. So that's, I would say, groupings around, you know, 100, 150 odd people, and then structure teams into each of those that were basically then delivering specific features and things for those type of product areas. And it used to give it a context. So digital, it's an organization, back then about 2,000 people, yeah? So still fairly large piece of an organization that we restructured and delivery change about that one. Not everyone went into this model, but I would say about 1,500 of them. And we used, I mean, as an organization, we needed help, external help. So lots of partners in terms of providing then the capabilities in terms of understanding how you do kind of agile software development and all of those things. I joined in 2016, so in May, so basically, so the CIO for this division, I knew him from past, kind of asked for an opinionated engineer to come in and help him build the capability. Because as I said, a lot of this was done through partners. So I came in and joined him, and what we did is really then start building up within Lloyds as an organization, not just to rely on partners, basically hiring software engineers, quality engineers, Scrum Master, all of those things that can help us actually accelerate this one. And basically make it a sustainable model for actually how to do this at pace. So this is basically what we did, and this is what I've been doing for kind of the last 2 years almost to a point. Because, as I said, this touched the digital division. And this is going to the point of, yeah, you can make things work very fast. We can build beautiful UIs. We can build the best mobile app in the world. But that's when the interesting comes, the legacy systems, because they normally don't work as fast. So I'm going to touch a little bit on that then. So why is it so hard to get it to work then later on? System of record, system of engagement. You heard about that? Jeffrey Moore came up with 2011 he wrote the book about that. Gartner added another layer around that, system of innovation. They talk about pace-layered architecture. And simplistic, if you look on it, you do things up here, you can move very, very fast. Down here is where your typical system of record is. And everyone knows what we mean with that? Anyone don't? Okay, very quickly then is think about where the old things where you used kind of all your customer records. So from a bank's perspective, where we store the customer details, where we store your transaction details, your current accounts, the transaction, all of that one, they're all stored in systems that were built many years ago. And generally they're quite hard to change if you don't have the right things. And that's kind of, that's where we talk about it. System engagement is more around then the customer experience, the thing, how do you interact with it, which is where the whole kind of change of customer behaviors. You have your internet banking kind of 8-10 years ago, you come on, log in, look on your bank details, make payments, all of those good things. Nowadays, pretty much everyone is starting to doing that on the mobile phone. And up here is then a little bit more the test and learn the aspects, the things that go a little bit faster. Gartner also came up with another interesting thing, bimodal IT. Anyone heard about that? Hands up. A couple. So they talked about basically, you're going to create a two-paced kind of IT delivery, as in you can move really fast here, but you're going to have a different delivery model here because it doesn't work very fast. Absolute rubbish, because of course you need to move fast here too. Otherwise, this is going to get very shiny, but you're always going to move as slowest. Fast as the slowest piece in the system, yeah? So if I just take this and overlay it with our mobile banking application, yeah? It's a decent one. I mean, it's ranked, very highly. It's kind of number one in the UK, fourth in Europe. I can't remember exactly the details there, but that's kind of where we are. So got very good customer ratings and all of that one. So we're brilliant with that. The problem comes then when you need to stop building new things, because generally you need to change things down here, and that takes a lot of time. So when we put in a lot of effort in moving very fast in this space, as I talked about earlier with the structure of the division, we quickly realized unless we get those guys with us, we're not going to be able to move at pace. We may not be known to do tons of innovative stuff, but we still need to move relatively quickly in comparison to our competitors. Otherwise, we will be left behind. And if they come then, the big disruptors, the Facebooks and everyone, start moving into this space, we need to be able to move at pace. Otherwise, so we need to unlock that part. And that's kind of where we said from 2017, moved in then to the next one. So I'm just going to touch a little bit before we talk about those bits and pieces here. Last summer, we reorganized. So we got rid of digital as a division, simply because we realized if that's getting all the focus, that's where all the investment money happens. We're going to underinvest in the things that actually matters behind the scenes. So that's kind of, we flipped it on the side. So we basically brought together business change and IT change into one organization called Group Transformation. We no longer have a digital division, and we then realigned parts of that new division to the business areas to be very, very closely aligned with business. So IT and business change then almost sits with the business. So we have along retail, we along insurance and commercial. We also have enterprise, which is more broad cutting. And personally, I was cross-cutting, so I covered, you saw the journeys before, so I was the head of engineering within digital, so I had teams across all of those ones. What are we doing now? I'm aligned to one of the product areas, so fully then focus on that from a perspective. So I'm looking after mortgages. So basically then, yes, there is a digital element to it, but it's not very large if you look on it. You can log in, you can do basically mortgage calculator is the typical one you may be familiar. Application in principle, we do allow you to do end-to-end mortgages online and so on and so forth. But of course, the whole fulfillment, everything that sits behind it, there's a lot more to it. In mortgage, about 70-odd system is actually what we have, and in my world we have. So you think about it, if you need to do changes in there, it's back to all of those kind of legacy system and so on and so forth. So when we now start looking at how can you create agility, how can you move in, how can you get innovation into that, is basically take what we learned within digital around those 2,000 people. Group transformation is 18,000 people. So we know moving the whole organization into a place where all of them understand what it means to be in delivering agile projects to create those and set us up for success. So in my own world, so we're going to create a number of those labs, but then cuts across the different type of areas from products. Just give you an indication of what it is. It's basically, if you look on it, it's the funnel and how you work through the process. So you start. People are interested in finding different mortgage products, yeah? So of course there's out there. That's kind of, are you having good ones? What it is? How do we actually conquer? How can we become the place where people go and look for, kind of easily find the right mortgages for them? The other one is then around the fulfillment. And then of course there is a servicing side of mortgages. Of course not the very sexy thing, because from a mortgages perspective, how often do you go log into it and look where your mortgage balance is? Not very often, but there are spaces in there, and in all of those areas there are things we can do to do a much better kind of customer experience, and that's where what can we then do? We need that agility into the end-to-end customer experience to get that agility in there and really make sure we can deliver change very, very fast. So we kind of structure then the organization. Because we have those legacy systems in the back, we need to do a lot of technical things too, because the way they are set up today, the way we have delivered change on them before, is not really suitable for a fast-moving world. So we kind of have a number of things that we want to go after. So kind of reduce the amount of effort that needs to go into making a change. That's kind of stating the obvious. Yeah, how can we make it simpler from that perspective? Kind of linked to it is then, if you can reduce the amount of things, that means you can normally move faster through the pipeline. You can deliver more things with the same amount of effort without dropping the quality. I mean, this is a key one, because as you can imagine, if I go in talking to kind of business stakeholder next week, it's like, yeah, I want to move and I want to do something really, really fast. They're going to have something like some of the things that happen. Are we really ready to release them? They're not very comfortable with kind of fast changing things in a banking environment. So we need to evidence that we're not going to do kind of reduce the quality. But anyone that is in software development, anyone that understands automation, all of those things, they know it. If we can tackle those, that one will automatically follow. It is just, you automate things, you programmatically provision everything, you don't have manual people in there, well, things will generally just work a lot better. It's known, but of course I can stand there as an engineer, I've done it a very long time, still doesn't convince them. We need to evidence that. So that's kind of, those are the things that we need to work through. But to make all of this work, because think about it, old school bank, delivering a lot of change, the people side of things is very, very important. So we're investing a lot of time trying then to kind of help educate, coach, and bring people along that journey. So if I look at my role now, we're about, in mortgage, about 650 odd people. 400 is probably around the old IT. Many of them have never worked in agile ways of working. Many of them don't understand kind of test automation and those type of things. How can we then make them kind of realize the values of doing it and get them on the journey to actually change it? So those are the things, if I look from a little bit personal perspective as an engineer, what we're trying to do. But these are the things, if we do that right, it will help unlock then the potential, a lot of it. And we have on a lot of areas already made significant progress in this space, but I mean, across 18,000 people, it will take quite some time before we get there. Any questions so far? Shoot.
I have a question. So, in a heavy regulated environment,
Yep.
how do you make the boat row faster? So, acknowledging that you've got value, you've got productivity, you've got quality and people, but you're a financial services organisation unlike RS.
Yeah.
So, how do you get over those challenges that the regulator provides and make the boat go faster so your people are on the journey, your customers are on the journey?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, from a, yes, regulation, there's a lot of things on there. So of course, we can't just jump on AWS tomorrow because of course the regulator will like to understand what that means to it. But it's not really the regulator that holds us back. It generally is more around the system and the way we're working, the kind of old school, the silos. So if we can do a lot of the automation things, I mean, that allows you to move a lot more faster than we do today. Is it fast enough? Probably not. But if you tackle that as a starting point, you're going to move from basically, well, I've finished my coding, I'm going to do some regression testing for, 4 weeks. And then I'm going to have some other people doing a few more testing because, make sure we did test it properly. Yeah. So delivery team testing, business assurance testing, 8-week cycle, and then we can release it. If you can then just go that a lot faster, when you can cut that down to weeks, if not days. And that's a massive improvement from where we were. But then, of course, you're going to be in a place where can we move even faster. The thing is, the business is not really ready to move that fast as an organization because of the things that you said. But we're going to be in a place where we can unlock the potential, so may basically remove IT from the equation. So we can move as fast as the business want to. And the day they come and we need to move a lot faster and the regulator becomes a blocker, that's probably when we need to go and have conversations with them. But right now, they're not really the things that holds us back.
You talked about people, regulators, and everything else that's maybe holding back some of the actual systems, the programs, the fact that it's so complex to upgrade? Or?
There are a lot of complexity in there.
Got a little bit of understanding of systems
Yes.
and facts, and understood that quite a lot of it is very hard to move. But
Yes. I have a few slides, so I'm going to come to it, but in essence, it is hard, but if you get the right focus and if the business allow you to basically invest, but generally, all the focus were on those digital channels that we talked about, 100 millions of pounds going in there, hundreds of thousands into that, is not really with the place you want to be. You want to get that balance right, because you can get it to work and you can simplify, and you need to get the focus right, and that's the kind of the place in order to get all of this moving a lot faster. So let's talk about this one, mainframes. What do you think it looks like? This is where it gets a bit fun. Is it something like this? So this is our lead engineer for Android applications. That's the mobile lead in Lloyds Banking Group. Luckily, he's not standing in one of our data centers. He was over in Palo Alto last week, and he visited kind of Computer History Museum. But that's old IBMs. That's what they looked like in the 60s, the tape thing is. It kind of goes back to kind of probably same age as some of mine, or even older than my old ones. But that's kind of the perceptions. That's how things look like. They look a bit more fancy, actually. So those are kind of IBM Z series. I'm not a promoter of IBM or anything, but I'm just gonna, and this is lots of stats here, but at the end of the day, they're pretty powerful machines. And they can do some things that, just take the last point, is probably the one I want to touch on. 25% of their stuff they don't ship, they're running Linux these days, So they're putting Linux, basically. You carve out your little world in that big mainframe, and you're running pretty much what you would do on your, the AWS and so on and so forth. So you can make quite interesting kind of runtimes on a mainframe like this. There's always that debate, that's very expensive and all that. It depends really about how much data volumes you're moving back and forth and so on and so forth. So just to cut it short, I'm not going to go through it. It's really, they are quite powerful. They can run things that most people do today if you wanted to. And considering we have a massive amount of workloads on there, because here's some stats. So basically 80%, I don't know if those numbers are correct, but it is kind of Robert Lamb comes from IBM that stated them. But I assume he knows a little bit about those things because they sell a few of those boxes, So 80% of the world's corporate data still runs on mainframes. Maybe not IBM's, but mainframes, It's going to be there for quite some time. You can't just move that off because it's not just the data in its own right. There's a lot of kind of things that goes with it, that comes programs and all of those things. As an example, our mortgages application, the backbone of our mortgage, it still runs on this one, It works. It do everything well. It's nothing really wrong with it. And the problem is everyone is saying, well, you can't move very fast. It's very complicated change. Yes, we built it over kind of 20 odd years. Of course, it is going to be a lot of legacy and things to improve. But you can actually use this thing very, very effectively if you want to. And the last one is kind of, 92 out of 100 runs those one. Lloyds being one. I'm pretty sure pretty much all the big banks have one of those or a few of those somewhere in a data center. So it's kind of, they are more than they can do fast. The thing is, should not be scared of it. And this is something where I think the perception is wrong, as you can't move fast on those things because there are tooling, and that's where I want to come to right now. I'm going to not bore you to death with kind of technical environments, those things, but development environment, I guess this is what you think about,
Yes.
That's a kind of mainframes, This is how it looks like, There are tools there today. You can use them. They were powerful. It's not very different from any other IDE that you're using, And if I look at what we've done, typical developer sits on his workstation, you do those things. I've taken away the tools simply because the cycle is exactly the same for our mainframe engineers as it is for our mobile kind of iOS or Android. And quite frankly, many of the tools are actually the same. So if I look on this, it's all going back to, I do some changes, I need fast feedback loops. That's what it all comes down to. Very often you may not have all the things like tooling to help you with code compliance, the code reviews may have not been brilliant, maybe you don't have any unit tests on your old legacy system, been around for forever and ever. If it is a few million lines of code, it might take some time to get there. The question then is, do you really need to have it all over it? Or is it that you only make sure that when you change something, you put tests in place to make sure you didn't break something? So really here, we're running, Jenkins as a build pipeline for our mainframes. Not all of them yet, but our teams. So we have exactly the same build pipeline for some of our mainframe teams. Not everyone, but the ones that do it, you still get the exact same cycle through there. And that's the kind of the key to it. If you're looking for tooling and so on, of course it comes back to you need to have the people and the culture and the way of working in there in first place. But the same tools apply to those mainframes. And if you get this in place, of course you can deliver very quickly, because when you change something, you know it's going to work. So what will hold you back is those things we talked about before. Maybe the business is a little bit uncomfortable pushing things up very fast, but it's not the IT that is holding you back. Very often we hear we are the ones that can't do it. Then, just very thing, it's about changing perceptions, yeah? So this is nowadays, our software engineers in the mainframes, they're sitting with our, Android, iOS guys, we're all working together. So we have had hackathons, we're pretty much with a full stack. And if I look in my Agile teams, they are full stack, as in, we have UX designers, we have people that can cut JavaScript, we have people that can write kind of the middle layer if you want, so the APIs, the microservices we heard about. But we also then have guys starting building our microservices and changes on the mainframe, because at the end of the day, RESTful APIs, you can expose it on a mainframe or you can run it on a, kind of nice boxes up in the cloud. But if we all work together, the perception on there, and we then start educating also making other people, whoops, shouldn't touch the screen when I touch screen, yeah. But so we have actually then evidence, and it was a really fun thing. We had kind of an offsite showing just a little bit. So we had some of the senior executives coming in and having to actually hack code, and we had a competition between the table who could check in the code and find the code bugs quick enough, and then check in the code and release it faster than the other tables. And that was kind of a 1 hour exercise when we did it. And it went down brilliantly, because no one had ever been on a kind of code, a mainframe or COBOL or something like that one. And of course, that helps just building a brilliant engineering community. That's kind of it.